Wonder, curiosity, connection. Where will your adventures take you? I'm Dr. Diane, and thank you for joining me on today's episode of Adventures in Learning. So welcome to the Adventures in Learning podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Diane, and today we have the executive producer of MSNBC's audio, Aisha Turner, with us today. Welcome to the show, Aisha.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So you and I met this summer in Colorado at Steve Spangler's Science in the Rockies, and you were tagging after a pretty amazing woman at that conference. I wanted to do a quick shout out to your mom. She was one of my favorite people in my workshop, and I'm so glad she introduced us.
Yes, she's one of my favorites as well. She was really the whole reason I was out west this summer. And it was really fun to just be a part of the teacher community for the summer. That was my second time going to a Steve Spangler event with her. We had gone to the Alaska cruise last summer. And so we were excited to also do the Rockies one. So yeah.
Now you just have to do Iceland.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the next one. There's a lot of hiking in Iceland, though. So
I highly recommend it, though. I did Iceland earlier this summer, and it was absolutely incredible. Steve dared me to do the first podcast from inside a volcano, so I did.
Did you? Oh, wow.
We actually recorded inside the volcano. It was pretty amazing.
Oh my gosh. I hope you got good sound, but even if you didn't, it's worth it.
It was decent sound, and there's actually a video that went with it that's out on YouTube, but it was so much fun. I can't speak highly enough about the experience. It was definitely changed the way I look at the environment and look at the world and sort of the things we can do for climate action.
How?
It got me thinking just in terms of what they're doing as a community. It made things like the glacial melt really visible. We were standing on a glacier and you can see an entire football stadium of what's melted in the last 10 years. That's a powerful visual image, and it gets you starting to think about what changes can I make at home? Who do I need to write to? How do I become more active in terms of speaking out on issues like that? So for me, it was things like that, the things that made what's really abstract very concrete. So I think trips like that, whether you can do them in person or somebody takes you along on them through a podcast or a blog or the visuals, I think those kinds of things make a huge difference.
That's amazing. Awesome.
So let's talk about you. You're a storyteller. You're the executive producer of MSNBC Audio. And I know you've been involved in StoryCorps. You produced Into America. You've been part of public radio. How did you become Aisha Turner, executive producer?
I sometimes feel like I fell into it. It sometimes still shocks me, honestly. But it actually makes so much sense. I always loved TV and media and storytelling growing up. Basically, I would go home every day and watch Oprah, and I would watch Oprah while I did my homework, and it's what was just always on. And I remember I would on snow days in school, I would love to it wasn't really about sleeping in for me. It was about I got to watch more of the Today Show. I was really excited about that. And I did the school newspaper when I was in high school, but I always kind of did the school newspaper, or in college worked on the Black Student Alliance magazine. I always sort of did it for quote unquote fun. And always thought I'll be a lawyer, or I'll work in politics, or work in nonprofit world. And then it really was late in college when I was in a class where we were really, studying the media's impact on the policy process. And I just was found myself really interested in that and really excited about that course. And it all of a sudden just occurred to me I could actually work in media. Oh yeah, someone has to do this thing that I really love doing, and it doesn't have to just be an extracurricular. And so I just started applying to internships and did an internship at the local, I think it was actually the local NBC affiliate in North Carolina. and did that for a little bit, and then just like was always sort of like, how can I do more of this? I don't know. And when I graduated from school, I got a fellowship at the PBS NewsHour, and so that was sort of like, I would say, like my journalism school in a way, was working there as a desk assistant, and because you got to move around departments every 2 months, and you got to work at like the foreign affairs desk, or you got to work in the tape unit, or you got to work on like the news desk with like breaking news, and just like get a sort of like 360 view of how they put the show together. And I thought it was fun and just kept going. And, would have moments where I would kind of come in and out of journalism because I am someone that is curious about a lot of different things, which I think is par for the course for journalists. And I spent some time abroad studying and doing fellowships in Europe. And then when I came back to the United States in 2016, heard about a job in Milwaukee that was like specifically focused on radio production and like doing podcasting and more narrative storytelling. And that I think really shaped a lot of how I approach my work today, because I'm still in audio. I'm still really interested in like narrative work. I feel really like I don't work in local news anymore, but I still sort of think about like, if I were in local, like how would I feel accountable to a community? So yeah, I think it was really just like got go through like a combination of just chasing what felt interesting and what felt exciting to me.
And tell us what it is you do now. What is your job at MSNBC?
So my job now is basically to run the podcasts that come out, and to kind of look at like what staffing is needed, to look at like what editorial approaches we want to take for different shows, to just like make sure that like we're on track to get stuff out. The main show that I work on is Into America. It's a show about Black politics and culture. And so we have a host for that show, Tremaine Lee, who, will have like a lot of ideas about like topics he wants to cover. And so then I sort of take that and sort of think about like, okay, like how do we actually do it? What are the practical steps we need to put in place in order to make that come to life? And then I'm just overseeing each step of the process of like producers and APs who are reaching out to possible guests, and like prepping interviews for him, or like going through and editing scripts, working with the marketing department to make sure that like we're buttoned up from that perspective as well. And it's just like really trying to make sure everything gets out the door and looks really great and sounds really great as we do it.
And from your position as an executive producer, what do you think are the qualities that make sort of the most engaging storytelling or the most engaging podcasts?
Yeah. I would say both from my perspective as an executive producer, but more so just from my perspective as a listener. I love work that is beautifully done, that has like a high quality of like just like really clean sound, and can uses like different interesting like scoring to bring something to life. I love podcasts that are really rooted in like intimate storytelling, where people are sharing something that like maybe they wouldn't in day-to-day life, but they're kind of working through a moment in their life that has been really pivotal to them. I love stories that where people are like willing to really share, because I think some of the stuff that we're listening to is sometimes it's hard to talk about, and no one really owes you the chance to talk about it, but it's nice. Or I mean, no one really owes you their story, right?
Right.
People don't have to share, but when people want to share and are ready to, I think it's just so beautiful, and it's like such a wonderful moment to kind of see someone else's journey and reflect on your own. And so I love that. I also love podcasts that like make me think about a moment in time differently than maybe I would have, like sort of like challenges like your assumptions. I think that's just really powerful, when it can really feel like a sort of this like just like an intellectual play almost.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and I think about that a lot in terms of how do we tell stories and how do we bring up issues in a way that it's not necessarily aggressive, it's not combative, it's human. And it allows you to feel a connection, to think about things in a way that maybe you didn't do it before.
Yeah.
And I think that also feeds into some really good storytelling.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
On your website, you had a phrase that I keep coming back to again and again, and it's talking about encouraging empathy, creating connection, and putting events into context so that the world feels less baffling. I think I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it's such a haunting phrase when I think about it. How does that describe you? How does that describe the work that you do?
Well, thanks. I'm glad that resonated so much. I think it ultimately describes what drives me, and it's something that it's easy to get away from that sometimes, right? Because you're like, okay, we have to put this thing out and just whatever sounds good, let's do it. And I think it's good. It's like, for me, I like to kind of come back to like, okay, when things get chaotic and when you're up against the deadline and you're trying to figure out the next project, just trying to figure out the why at the center of it. And so to me, I just see how much is influenced by like misunderstandings of one another, or just like a closed-mindedness towards one another. And I don't mean it in like we have to all get along with people who are harmful to us. Like, I really, really don't mean it in that way, but I do think it's important to just move with the world with a sense of compassion and a sense of grace. And I think that there is so much storytelling that doesn't do that like really strips the nuance out of something. And to a certain extent, it's inevitable because a story has to just like, you got to get to the point. You only have so much time, right? But I think as much as we can, like, as storytellers, be thinking about like, okay, like how do we handle someone's story with care? Because like so much negativity can come from not doing that. It really is like the driving force for me, and really probably goes back to what I was saying before of like, I took that class of like on how media influences the policy process. I think it kind of goes back to that, where it's like, okay, what kind of media is like creating perceptions of Black communities or immigrant communities or queer communities? And how is that then impacting like the political policies that are like that might be holding people back? And so wanting to just make sure that any work that I do or that I'm involved with is like really constantly like reflecting and challenging itself. And that also means like for me too, reflecting and challenging myself, because we all have our, like our blind spots. And just wanting that to be a core part of my work. And then that sense of like connection and wanting things to feel less baffling. I think part of the reason people don't pay attention to the news a lot of times is because it can feel so overwhelming, or it just feels like we're sort of talking in a bubble. But if we're not all on the same page about like the basic facts of what's going on, or can have like a shared analysis, it's really hard to get anything done, I would think. And so to me, it's just like about just like making sure that we're honoring like where everyone is, and we're not sort of operating with a sense of elitism as well. And just like making sure that we're not discarding people as we try to kind of come to a shared understanding of the world.
Who do you Are you tired of same old professional development experiences? Check out what recent workshop participants have to say about doing a workshop with Dr. Diane's Adventures in Learning. Great hands-on session that included real ideas to incorporate in the classroom. Wonderful. Lots of great ideas and fun science experiments. It was great to be able to see how to make connections between the stories and science. If you are looking to raise your game and have a professional development experience that will leave your educators feeling rejuvenated and ready to directly apply ideas into their classrooms, reach out to Dr. Diane's Adventures in Learning. We offer half and full day workshops that examine ways to build connections between multicultural picture books and STEM experiences for gains across the curriculum. All programs can be tailored to your specific needs, so find out what audiences across the country have been experiencing. Check out Dr. Diane's Adventures in Learning at www.drdianeadventures.com. We hope to be in your school soon. Thinking about building those connections and engaging audiences, if you could reach out and bring audiences into a shared connection, who would you want to target and why?
I guess there's like a few answers to that. One answer to that would be people who are generally like apathetic or feel a sense of hopelessness. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of people have not felt a sense of power, and therefore feel like a little bit checked out. And I think that makes sense, but I also think it's sort of sad to me sometimes, that sense of apathy, and it feels, it starts to, that sense of like apathy and that sense of hopelessness, I think can be really hard to overcome. And so I would say people who feel like there's no point.
And in the children's literature world, we talk a lot about books as windows and mirrors, that people need to see themselves reflected in the stories that are presented and see multiple versions of who they can be and the possibilities, but they also need the opportunity to see other cultures and other people reflected. And I wonder, as you're talking about apathy and hopelessness, if maybe part of that is from not feeling seen, that they don't feel that they're seen and connected to what is going on in the world around them.
Yeah. And they don't feel like other people think they're important, and then therefore maybe start to think that also.
Yeah, definitely challenges. What are some of the biggest challenges of being a producer in media today?
I think speed is one thing, because you want to have nuance and because you want to make sure everything is just like as thorough as possible, but you also want to get things out really quickly. I think that those things can pull on each other. I think also trying to figure out like who your audience is too, and making sure that you're speaking in a way that is like wide and inclusive, but also you're not just like preaching to people that already agree with you, and just like really kind of constantly staying clear on like that why question again. And then also just frankly, like resources, everything is very tight. Excuse me. I think like a lot of other industries, it's can be a tough time. And so you're trying to constantly like fill the appetite for content, but also, you can feel like really stressed out, and stretched thin while doing it.
And what are some issues or some stories that you feel maybe haven't gotten the attention that they need in the mainstream media, and maybe are the stories that you'd like to see podcasts and other storytellers take on?
Well, one is like actually what we were talking about earlier, like around like a climate change and climate impact. I think it's certainly talked about um, broadly speaking, and especially given the news about like the summer being the hottest on record and all of that. But I think that I wish there was more analysis with other social issues that we're facing, like really more emphasis on like how this these like climate like chaos that we're in is particularly impacting like marginalized communities, is like overlapping with the ways in which pollution harms like Black communities so acutely, in the ways in which it influences like or like is creating climate refugees. um I would really love to see it focused on like the actual impact on people who are already hurting, because I think otherwise it feels too far off. It feels too like heady. And I would really love to see it like really tailor towards like, no, like it's not just about like, oh, like separate your glass into the right color container. It's really
Right.
like there's like people are like dying, right? And like really hurting. And one of the stories we did on Into America was about um like the heat crisis in prisons, and how like because there's like a lack of air conditioning and there's these really close quarters, like people are really like having severe health outcomes. And so like just like stories like that like make sure to like kind of come back to like the core of who's impacted. um and then I would love to see more on like, I guess it's sort of connected to issues like this, of like issues around like food security and homelessness and things that like I think oftentimes we know are a problem. We sort of say like, oh, it's not news anymore because it's always a problem. Just like figuring out creative ways to like tackle these like ongoing acute problems. Because it is easy to kind of just say like, well, this is a matter of fact and we just live with it. But trying to not treat the ongoing problems as if they don't matter anymore because they're quote unquote old news.
And that makes a lot of sense to me. And what you said about building connection is really important. One of the things I was thinking about in terms of getting people to care about these issues is they've got to recognize the very real impact it's having on people, and to see the day-to-day impacts of these things in a way that it's compelling and you build empathy and connection. And I think also finding a way to tell the stories of the people who are actually trying to do something about it. Because I think all too often we get caught in we can't do anything about it. It's too big an issue. It's been here forever, like you were saying. And we lose sight of the people who are trying to do something on a day-to-day basis, who are making small changes, and it requires more work, I think, to find those stories. But I do think they're out there.
Yeah, yeah. There's like something called solutions journalism, where there's like really that practice of like trying to look at like what's working or not, and really, and not in like a sort of fluff kind of way, but like really do like a thorough analysis of like what's going on and how this happened and what are the drawbacks, and just trying to like be more mindful there.
So you mentioned Into America. I was going to ask, I loved the example you gave. Are there other stories that you all have covered, other episodes that stand out for you as being examples of the kind of journalism that you would like to see others embracing?
I mean, my favorite sort of series or project that we've done was called Reconstructed. It was about the history of the Reconstruction era after the Civil War,
That
and
one
like
was so
looking at
good.
this. Thank you. And it was this 4-part series looking at the Reconstruction era and this initial wave of freedom when people were released from being enslaved and trying to like establish political power, trying to find land. And we then like connected it to issues today. And I just like really like loved working on that. Like I loved being in the archives just to sort of like learn about like what things were like in that moment. And like, especially as a moment that like we don't always like hear and learn about. And then how those things parallel to where we're at now, because I think it was just a time to like really kind of look at that. You know, when we talk about like in order to know your future, you get to know your past and like all those things, it really felt like a great example of that to me.
Well, and it's a great series, and I was thinking that it's resources like that, especially as we've got people in power who are trying to silence telling the truth about history, to be able to have stories like that are being told. I think it's more important than ever, and especially as a resource for educators and families to be able to listen and learn.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you mentioned Oprah back at the beginning as being one of your first influences. How has Oprah continued to influence your work today? Are there other folks that you look up to as mentors or as people who have taught you what you know about the industry?
Yeah. Well, so Oprah, part of the reason I like always think about her is like she always just like seemed to bring herself to the work and just like really show up with like genuine like curiosity and openness and it seemed to be able to cover a range of topics that like maybe for some people would have felt taboo or hard to talk about and she was like able to do it with that like a real sense of what seemed like just like open-mindedness and empathy. And so that I think has like influenced like what I do now quite a bit. I mean, I think my sort of current journalist crush is like has to be Nikole Hannah-Jones. Like even before she did 1619, I just like loved her reporting on around education and that ability to like take history, bring it forward to today, put it in a context of like personal storytelling. I just think is like masterful in any interview I listen to. Like I could just like listen to her forever. And especially now that she has like really, really blown up even more and become more of a force. I I just really like respect and value her voice in the world. And so especially she's my new Oprah.
I agree. She's amazing. And
Yeah.
so quick things. You mentioned curiosity. What are you most curious about today?
Oh my gosh. Well, mostly right now I'm curious about the vacations that I'm going on. I'm going to Costa Rica in a little bit. So I'm like, oh my gosh. like like learning about like other cultures really. And just like really I feel really eager to get back to traveling more and get back to like so much of my work recently has been focused on like the US and news here. And there was like a phase in my life when I was like really engaged in like more in like international affairs. And so that feels like where I'm just like feeling a little bit of restlessness now where I'm like, oh wait, I feel like I need to get back to like understanding like other contexts and other ways of life and other political systems. And yeah, I'm excited to be traveling more and just learn about different places in the world and how it all comes together.
So Costa Rica's next. What else is on your bucket list?
Um, my bucket list is long.
That's
Costa
okay.
Rica's
Mine
on
is too.
it, South Africa's on it, Morocco's on it, Colombia's on it, Japan is on it. Yeah, pretty much everywhere.
And what's the best book you've read recently?
Ooh. Okay, so it's like not academic at all,
That's
and I'm
okay.
like forgetting the name of it. I'm seeing if it's nearby. Oh my God. I'm gonna like look it up to make sure I don't mess up the name.
Sure. I'll ask you the
Okay, it's
question
called
again.
You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty.
You made a fool
And
of death with your beauty, and what's that about?
it's really it's about like love and grief ultimately. It's a novel. It's about someone who has lost someone really important to them and now is trying to like figure out who they are in this era of grief and not quite wanting to let go, but also needing to move forward, and just how difficult and messy that can be, but also how necessary it is.
Excellent. What's something that brings you joy?
Well, this is bringing me joy right now. Just connecting with new people, having to reflect in interesting ways. I think taking on this new role at work and having like a new challenge. Yeah, just trying to keep growing.
And as we're approaching 2024 and you're looking ahead to the new year, what's one adventure that you hope to take?
I'm trying to line my travels up. And then what else do oh my gosh. I didn't even know. I want to do more art classes. And that's not like an adventure out in the world. I mean, it's an adventure, but I want to lean into that. I want to lean into like being a creator as much as possible.
And what does being a creator mean to you?
That's what I'm trying to figure out, honestly. Like I think this summer I took a drawing class and I took a pottery class and I took a jewelry making class. And I think it means like following my curiosity, trying to make something new out of original materials, trying to like kind of always go after and capture like that like spark that you kind of feel in like elementary school art class of like, I haven't done this before. I haven't done it in a long time. And just have it be fun and playful.
Well, I wish you a fun and playful new year. And thank you so much for being on the Adventures in Learning podcast. It has been such a joy to talk to you today. We'll share your information in the show notes so that people can follow your podcasts on MSNBC. Okay. Thank you for being with us, Aisha.
Thank you so much. This is so fun.
You've been listening to the Adventures in Learning podcast with your host, Dr. Diane. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe, download, and let us know what you think, and please tell a friend. If you want the full show notes and the pictures, please go to drdianeadventures.com. We look forward to you joining us on our next adventure.